All right, Matthew, welcome to episode 71 of the Performance Advantage podcast, where we bring sports science to the people with myself, Dr. Will O'Connor, and Dr. Matt Miller. Dr. Matt Miller is a world leader in MTB research and inventor of brake case sensors and analysis software. He has a lifetime of MTB racing experience and coaching experience around the world with UCI cross-country, EWS, and downhill.
Dr. Will is an elite ultramarathon runner and a professional coach. He brings across his expert knowledge in ketogenic performance nutrition, elite triathlon experience, and is also a Training Peaks coach educator. All right, well, so based on the success of our Using Sports Science to Train More Effectively masterclass, we've been working on these two new courses, one on running, one on mountain biking, and they're called the Fundamentals of Using a Power Meter for Mountain Biking or for Running. So these are going to be for people who are interested in using technology to train better and want to get a real good understanding of how to use that data to do their training. So in running, power meters aren't really well understood. In mountain biking, hate to say, power meters aren't really well understood. So we want to simplify that and give you all the information that you need to use these devices.
That's right, and you can find those as well as all our past episodes and articles that we've written, as well as contacts for us for coaching and consultations on the Performance Advantage podcast website.
All right, so this week on the show, we have Dr. Lewis Kirkwood. He did his PhD in mountain biking, mostly focused around vibrations. And we know that in mountain biking, the trails are really rough and it exposes our body to some potential issues. So our body has a really good strategy to start to dampen these vibrations and make sure our head doesn't get shaken. But it's still really dangerous, and it increases the amount of energy that we need to use. So during my PhD, we started looking at vibrations, and then we started looking at pacing strategies. So, you're not able to change the way the vibrations are exposed to you, but you can change the way you use your energy. And if you coast a little bit more, maybe you can go faster down the descent. So for me, this led to a big tangent that is now Brake Ace, where we're focused on measuring and understanding and changing braking. But Dr. Lewis, he's kind of stuck with vibration stuff, and he has some really cool projects around that.
Yeah, I remember doing your study, and there's that photo of me, and I'm just like, have accelerometers all over my body. I've got a gas analyzer. I'm on the mountain bike. I've got this crappy helmet on, and you measured me going down this trail where I pedaled once, and then rode back up, and then didn't pedal, and I went faster without pedaling. And you analyzed my braking with like your software and your brake case sensor, and then you showed me like what I was doing with my braking, and it was mind-blowing because that was after it all, and then I like could go back and you gave me like three of the corners to target.
Yeah, brake case has actually really come a long way now, and I'm still so interested in the vibrations. So we've been looking at like how vibrations change during braking, but my focus has to be on braking. So yeah, that's what we've been doing, is showing you the places on the trail where you can improve the most. So we call it your key opportunities. And we have some really cool ways to be able to score your braking. So now I can compare myself to you and compare yourself to what you do in these different kind of runs. So if you pedal all out, how efficient is your braking versus if you're coasting and pumping and saving all this energy. So that's been really exciting. We've had some really cool developments lately with our app and some new features that we're able to offer. And it's really cool. And I just love making riders faster. So this episode kind of fits really well around that, where this is what I love to do, is make riders get faster. This is what Lewis likes to do. And, obviously Will loves to talk about it too. And he's able to take that extra spin on it around running and as a mountain biker. So this is a really cool episode, and I think you guys will really enjoy it.
Yeah, that's awesome. If we want to find out a bit more about Brake Ace, Matt, before we get on with it, where can we hit you up?
At Brake Ace or brakeace.com.
Sweet. All right, let's get into it. All right, Lewis, welcome to the show. It's great to have you on.
It's great to be here. Thanks very much for having me.
So whereabouts are you at this point in time in the world?
I am in Edinburgh at the moment, in sunny Scotland.
We were just talking about how sunny it was, and in New Zealand, obviously, we're heading towards summer, which is amazing. We've been just waiting for this. But your days are getting shorter. And it turns out your days get really short in winter.
Yeah, still dark at 9 a.m. and dark again by 5 when you ride home. So perfect.
Yeah, one of the things, like when I did my undergrad in Christchurch, it's probably not to that extreme, but it's not far off, was like trying to dry your washing. You had like this one window, if it was a good day, between 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. And you got to get it out then, and you got to get it back in, otherwise it somehow ends up wetter than when it came out of the washing machine and frozen.
In Scotland, it'll be frozen or wetter. It won't be dry.
Yeah, I've been to Edinburgh actually.
Oh yeah,
a beautiful place. Yeah, I only spent a couple of days there, but I came in. I'd been in London, catching up with my cousin and some friends from school. So I'd had, they took me out on the town. Then I had to catch this train, which is atrocious after about 1 hour's sleep, up to Edinburgh. And then the next day I did the park run there, which goes along, I know, is it the coast or something you have down there? But
yeah, it'll be down at Cramond. Yeah,
amazing. Yeah, like beautiful coastline, and just it was an awesome town. There's all these little alleyways and everything. I thought it was a really cool place. I was wanted to get to explore it a bit more, but
you were too hungover, weren't you?
Yeah, pretty much.
That's the old Will.
Yeah.
It's good for beers, and it's good for mountain biking as well, because you've got loads of places that are mostly an hour away. So,
well, actually, just as a bit of an aside, in terms of running and trail running, you have in Scotland, you have the right to roam law, which essentially says you can go wherever you want, like across someone's property.
As long as you don't have a throttle, I think you're fine.
Oh, yeah.
Seriously, as long as you don't have a twist grip, and away you go.
And so do you guys utilize that for in mountain biking as well? Like, do people go shred some trails around?
Just in someone else's backyard?
Yeah.
The most obvious option or example would be up north. So there's a lot of walking tracks and stuff through some really scenic places, and you can ride pretty much wherever you want. It doesn't mean that landowners will make it easy for you. Sometimes there's some pretty big fences to get over and that kind of stuff. But in general, yeah, you can go wherever. And it's more on the gravel bike that I end up in people's gardens by accident, following a route I'd drawn on Strava and stuff like that. But people aren't too bothered as long as you're kind of quiet and don't cause trouble. Do big skids on their nice lawn running. So.
Dig up massive dirt jumps.
Yeah, like you have the right to roam, but not the right to skid.
Yeah.
They're different, aren't they?
That should be the slogan for the campaign for responsible access.
Nice.
I like it.
So, Lewis, why don't you give us a little bit of a background on yourself and kind of what you get amongst on the daily?
All right. Cool. Well, winding it way back to when I was a teenager, I really wanted to be a cross-country pro and was on the British Cycling Programme pathway, and swiftly got ejected from that when I wasn't good enough. And then around that time, I got glandular fever and was probably fairly heavily overtrained as well, which leads to where we are today in terms of how I've got to this point in my interests. So fast forward a bit to undergrad, did undergrad at Edinburgh Napier University, so 4 years in Scotland, and my honours project was all about the demands of enduro. And then PhD came after that, started that in 2016, and that was the performance in enduro mountain biking, the influence of training status, recovery, and vibration. And also since 2010, I've been a mechanic in a bike shop, either in Edinburgh, did a short time in Whistler between undergrad and PhD, and now I'm mechanic for World Cup Downhill team, Norco Factory team. So at the moment, I've got that job and also a research assistant at Edinburgh Napier. So just a 1-year contract, which is actually coming to an end potentially quite soon. So daily for me at the moment is, or has been, quite a nice variety. I've been working on the DIRT project with kind of alongside IMBA Europe and a higher education institution in Norway, and with other partners looking at developing inter-European resources for trail building. So I've been doing that kind of 1 day a week, and then otherwise commercial projects for industry in mountain biking. So looking at the influence of products on vibration exposure, if that makes sense. So if they want to market that this product reduces vibration, then we can test that for them. So COVID ruined a lot of both jobs this year, but we've kind of managed to rescue that. So
Is there much like, how does it work? So someone has a product and they're like, hey, like, we're saying in our marketing that this can help reduce vibrations. Why don't you check it out? Is that kind of how that works?
basically, yeah, I think the mountain bike industry, everyone has their own take on what kind of place that is. You probably have a better idea than I, to be fair. And there's a lot of claims which are completely unjustified or they're not backed up. And I think companies are starting to realize that if they want to put their head above the pack, then they're going to have some data to back it up. And if we can offer that as an independent resource, then that's a service which seems to be of interest to companies. So yeah, that's basically what we're doing.
Yeah, cool. I've been surprised really by the real lack of data acquisition by companies. And hopefully that we can take this podcast eventually in this direction. But there's a lot of lab work going on, obviously, because they need to make sure that their products are up to snuff, basically. But out in the field, I don't see really anything going on apart from a select few companies measuring braking at all, you know, like, it was really a big surprise for me.
Yeah. And that leaves you in a place which is kind of difficult because it's worked for so long, that approach. And then now you come along with a product saying, well, actually we can, whether it's test these claims or help you develop a better product. I think it maybe comes as a bit, not necessarily of a shock, but you're kind of the new guy that's turned up and gone, well, you're saying this, now let's find out if that's actually the case, or, you know, I can help you. And I think initially can sometimes be a bit standoffish. Other companies welcome you with open arms. I don't know if you find the same thing.
Yeah, definitely. Like there are some companies that are real happy to just learn more so that they can make better products. And with BrakeAce, obviously we focus on braking, but actually there's lots of things that integrate with your brakes, like your hubs. So your hubs need to be strong. And how strong do you make a hub? Because it's a great place to save weight. Well, we don't know how light we can make it because we don't know what kind of forces are going into it. So we've been working with some companies on that, but other companies they just don't want to hear it because they don't want to be told. I don't know. Like, we don't want to tell anyone that they're wrong. We just want to be able to help them to be more right, really. And maybe it comes off the other way.
Yeah. So I think there's definitely a key part of how we go about that is approaching people in the right way, or, you know, making ourselves approachable, I guess. But yeah, like you say, and I think the analogy that I've had a lot for vibration is that people have been spending a lot of time making bikes strong enough so that they don't break. And then now we've got to the point that bikes don't break as often as they used to. And they're actually almost, if anything, we're looking at ride characteristics rather than will it break or not. So I don't know, it's an interesting time. Sounds like the same with the hubs you spoke about there. So
Yeah, everything's just moving so quickly. I think, companies are kind of catching up, and then also they need to allow time to think ahead as well. And it's kind of difficult to do both because everything has changed so quickly.
Yeah, it really has, especially if you look back at bikes from only sort of 5 years ago or something. We're looking at a vastly different setup now. So yeah, it's exciting. I think there's definitely a place for it. I think as people like yourself and hopefully ourselves try and work with these companies, then it's going to ultimately lead to better bikes. However that happens in reality. So
yeah, and that's what we all want. So that's good. So can you talk us a little bit through kind of how you manage all these things that you have going on? So you're working on the World Cup, which obviously this year was a little bit of a shambles, but then you're also doing research. How do those two kind of things work together?
Yeah, so I'm really lucky since undergrad, really, and potentially even a bit before that. When I was racing XC, I was on the same team as who ended up being my supervisor for my PhD, Leslie Ingram, or Ingram Sills as she is now. and she suggested I go and apply for Napier to do my undergrad, because I had no idea there was such a strong mountain bike presence at Napier. And she also introduced me to Geraint Florida James, now Professor Geraint Florida James, who ended up being my DOS for my PhD. So Leslie's my line manager now, and G is ultimately the big boss of Mountain Bike Centre of Scotland. And so they both understand that for me to be at the World Cups is really beneficial in terms of seeing the arguable leading edge of bike technology as things come out. So this year was working on a prototype downhill bike that Norco have. And for me to see how that works in the prototyping process and all that kind of stuff. And for, I hate the word, but profile. So as your profile, because I don't know if you saw the article on Pink Bike about vibration. And basically it was Norco Factory team mechanic Lewis Kirkwood thinks X, Y, and Z, not, Dr. Lewis Kirkwood from Edinburgh Napier University. So it's quite funny how it works. But thankfully each party can see the benefit to the other. And I ultimately take some holidays and a lot of unpaid leave from university to do the World Cup job. So I like the balance. It's one day you're trying to do flow cytometry, and then the next you're picking up a hire van from Nice and driving it to Barcelona and that kind of thing. So I don't know, like it definitely works for me. It keeps things fresh. So yeah, ultimately really hoping my contract gets extended.
Yeah, that sounds pretty cool, especially if you can continue doing both, which would be, amazing.
Yeah, it was Ben Arnott's Instagram bio of all places that he summed up the best. He said he's just waiting for it all to come crashing down, and I feel like that's me at the moment. I hope that doesn't sound ungracious or whatever you would say, but yeah, feel pretty lucky. So.
It is a bit like that when your story's similar to probably mine and Matt's, where we were studying and training hard, getting overtrained, then wanting to put more of a focus onto understanding something as opposed to just thrashing ourselves, and then your whole life starts to become like your dream. Like every kind of aspect, you start talking with these companies you've like purchased their products and read about in magazines, and then they're contacting you, and then there's like these professional athletes you're working with, and you're like, this is like everything I was trying to achieve by being an athlete, but now I'm on like the other side of the fence, and it's potentially cool. It's exactly what I want. And you're like, please, is this real? Like, is this like, sometimes it's horrible,
Yeah.
like anything can be, but yeah, it's amazing when you, especially because like knowledge is something that I guess we're pretty lucky with the modern era of technology and social media, where knowledge probably wasn't as valuable as asset as it used to be, where like it'd be hard for someone like you to be able to say, I'm working on vibration, like come get the stuff. But now you can get an article on the world's largest mountain bike website, which is seen by kind of millions of riders, and a company representative will see that, or a rider, and they'll contact you via social media because you're ever present there. And like it's just the cycle. It's worked for Matt and I, and now we can leverage our knowledge base and like our experience with PhDs, which otherwise was kind of like you're just overqualified for most jobs.
Yeah, I think if 16-year-old me would just be absolutely delighted with the situation I'm in just now, and as it turns out, 27-year-old me is just as delighted as I was back, if that makes sense. So, yeah, it's really quite surreal. I think that's kind of it. Like you say, when you are still on that pathway in your head of trying to be really good as an athlete, and then it's weird going from that reading articles on Pink Bike to then being in articles on Pink Bike. I'm still reading articles on Pink Bike, don't get me wrong, but I don't know. Yeah, that's exactly it. And having that knowledge, and I think ultimately, I was talking about it with my mum actually. It was like, although she saw me effectively have my hopes and dreams crushed, as she put it, in terms of glandular fever and all that stuff. The reality is, I was never good enough. and I still like riding now, and I'm still never going to be, you know, world number one, but it's, you know, it takes the pressure off. I ride for fun, have a good time, and I think I feel my calling way more with all the data and the companies and all that kind of stuff, which I think is, you know, it's a bit hippy dippy maybe, but yeah, that's exactly it. You've nailed it. So
It's funny because I was talking to one of my athletes kind of about this same thing last night. So he's on the grind, if you will, on the cusp of becoming an XC pro. So as you know, like that takes a lot of work. And it also takes a lot of years. So, and if you let up at all and you know, throw in the towel for a short time or whatever, it's just not going to happen. So you need to stay on it, and you like train properly and you take breaks and all that kind of stuff. But if there's like ever a thought that comes into your head that it's not going to happen, and you somehow tell yourself that it's not going to happen, it's just not going to happen because you're going to let up, and you know, you're not going to continue your upward trajectory. And I find that it's actually really similar, that kind of journey, and then the journey in your life after riding, you know. So all of us, we kind of like didn't make it as pros when we were younger. We all had glandular fever, which is, you know, kind of interesting, the overtraining kind of syndrome.
That is. Yeah, I didn't realize you guys had it too.
Yeah, we have an episode all on overtraining where we gave our stories, actually.
I'm going to have to listen to that,
yeah. You'll probably, it'll all resonate with you, I'm sure.
Yeah, it's related with a lot of people, so.
Yeah. But I see the journey of that, trying to be an athlete and being the best athlete you can, to kind of the journey that I'm on now. And for me, it's with it was kind of PhD into brake ace thing. If I would have let up, it wouldn't have happened. And, you know, that doesn't mean that it is happening now, because it still is bloody hard every day. But, you know, I see that this is what I want to do, and I'm not going to stop. I'm just going to stay on it because I know what happens if you let up. So we need to, you know, stick with it and stick to what we believe in and just keep going. And you need something to do. You know, I'm not trying to be a pro athlete anymore, so I don't want to just like punch the clock and head home. I need something to like really push me. So.
Yeah. That analogy really resonates. It's the same with, well, I'm sure you guys know the figures on PhDs and stuff in terms of completions, how many that are started or finished and all that kind of stuff. And I probably shouldn't talk too loudly because my girlfriend is next door in her bedroom with 3 weeks to go before she submits hers. But I don't think she'll give up now. But yeah, it's definitely the same thing where if you let that doubt creep too far into your mind, eventually it's going to take over and you're not going to get there. And yeah, I hadn't thought of it that way. So yeah, there we go. Obviously, we weren't meant to be athletes.
Yeah.
Instead. So.
You know, maybe 10 years we'll look back on this podcast and think, we weren't meant to be scientists either. Maybe we'll be something else. I don't know what the glandular fever equivalent is in academics or in industry, but it must be something.
Yeah, we'll just be just be organic fruit farmers.
Yeah, I reckon. That's kind of my dream anyway.
Pursuit of an easy life. Yeah.
Okay, so vibrations. Right. So I did a bit of research on vibrations. So like with my PhD, that's actually how it started. I was like, okay, we want to model the perfect mountain bike race based on a power meter. Like we're going to use the critical power model, which most academics would have heard of, where it's just we know what you can sustain pedaling and we know how fast you recover. So I was like, okay, actually we can apply that to mountain biking because you go uphill, downhill. So we noticed, okay, there's something happening on the downhills where you're not able to recover in mountain biking because we see that the heart rate stays elevated for a long time. So we looked at vibrations on the downhills because my supervisors had been looking, I guess they did some of the first research on vibrations in mountain biking. So that study was pretty cool because we were trying to understand what was happening. And we saw, okay, your oxygen uptake's really high going down this hill, even though you're coasting. Like, what the heck's going on there? But for us, we went on this massive tangent that is braking, and I kind of got away from measuring these vibrations on the downhill because braking was all consuming in my life. But you focused a lot on vibrations. So yeah, I figured you'd be a good one to talk to, like, what the heck is happening with all these vibrations in mountain biking, and then what are the carry-on effects for us as riders, and, potential issues that arise.
Yeah, sure. So kind of like yourself, I think my supervisors have been working in the field for quite a while, and as technology has advanced, that's been a fairly big part of how the research has been able to advance as well. So it wasn't a lack of know-how as much as equipment that was available. And so a lot of it was done kind of up to about halfway through my PhD with the little catapult S5 units, which are more widely used in rugby or football. You can usually see them between the players' shoulder blades on their back kind of thing, but they're not really designed for mountain bike use. The sample rate's a bit low, that kind of stuff. So I'd used that in my first year of my PhD, having a look around at some elite races to see what we could find, and used them as well for just about halfway through, almost exactly, did a study where went to an enduro race where we had 9 participants, and all 9 finished in the top 10 positions of the race at a sort of international level. So they were pretty good guys at the time. One of them was world number 1. And nothing will have you knock over a sharp spin in the lab like trying to test the world number 1. Certainly not for me anyway. So anyway, they all completed the race with this little unit on. We were looking at vibration, and we took blood before, sort of 2 to 7 days before the race, an hour after the race, and then the morning after to look at recovery. And we could see something going on with the vibration dose, and then the change in cell subsets pre and hour post. So the more vibration, the more egress of some of these cells. And we still need to publish this. We've written the manuscript. So we just need to actually get that through the peer review process. Pretty confident in the data. We have seen it. And we also controlled for, like yourself, in a slightly different manner. We used Lucia's training impulse to measure physiological demand of the race. It could have been Lucia's, Edwards, Bannister's, individualized. They all came out roughly the same for the race, and the results still stood. And there's a bit of a backstory why it was Lucia's in the end. And vibration was a much better predictor of these changes in cell subsets than training impulse, which is heart rate based. So I don't think that'll be particularly surprising to either of you that the vibration was more intuitive of the immune system, or one component, the cellular component of adaptive and innate immune system in recovery. So that comes back to glandular fever. You can't cheat your immune system. I'm imagining you will discuss that in the overtraining episode. So that's interesting.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So I guess what that kind of says to me, so this model that you're using to kind of quantify the load of this race, using heart rate, maybe it looks like the race wasn't that hard. But then if you look at the vibrations, it looks like the race was crazy hard.
So in addition to that was one part of my PhD, and those same athletes, we followed them for the best part of a year, and we collected all of their training data and analyzed sort of all the TRIMP models week by week, that kind of stuff. And so, like I said, these were pretty high-class athletes. They'd all finished in the top 100 in the world at some point in their career, and half of those had finished in the top 10. So we had some, pretty good athletes. And at the time, Deo Sanders and et al., he brought out a paper in well-trained road cyclists. So these were kind of national level road cyclists, and he had the same data for them, as in weekly average TRIMP values. And I can't remember the exact figures for each, but basically these mountain bikers that we were following were doing half the TRIMP of the equivalent road cyclists. So they had similar VO2 and similar sort of lactate profiles, but yet the mountain bike athletes were doing half of the training load as measured by heart rate. So whether or not the race was high or low in terms of training impulse, the weekly values that we were seeing for them were much lower than the equivalent road race per se. So I don't know if that helps answer your question. So once we got to there, we thought, well, there has to be something, kind of like yourself. We're like, well, if the heart rate doesn't tell us what's going on, then what is tiring these people to the point of, like, we had a couple of athletes that, again, I'm not not qualified to say whether or not they were overtrained, but you definitely saw some stuff happening that you're thinking is pointing that way, if that makes sense. So they're getting to the point where they're doing too much, but only doing half the trimp of the road athletes who were improving throughout with no signs of overtraining. So
Right. So is that then what kind of led to this deeper investigation into vibrations?
yeah, exactly. So like I was saying, when we went to that race and took blood, that was when we were still using the catapult units. They record at 100 hertz, and they were on the bike, so they were on the seat post of the bike because that was where we could keep them out of the way for the size they were. They're kind of the size of like the old Nokia 3310 smartphone. You know, you could sorry, not smartphone. You could play Snake 2 on it.
Yeah, everyone had that phone and probably still has it.
Yeah,
probably
exactly.
still batteries still charged.
Probably building houses and cars out of those things.
Yeah.
One day we'll have roads paved with those. Like, look at these cobbles in the year 3000. It's all Nokia phones.
Only if we've got tires strong enough for them yet. So, yeah, that's basically how we got to that point. And it was kind of then that we started collaborating a bit with engineering. So we were interested in, well, you'll know this, Matt, in terms of vibration in mountain biking, every paper you read seems to have a different way of doing it. So
yeah, because I'm thinking, I remember doing Matt's one, and yeah, it was weird. We had like accelerometers all over our strap to ourselves. Yeah.
Yeah, we even we had put one on the forehead as well, because I guess what's happening from the physiology standpoint is you're going through all these vibrations, and then your body dampens them. So the whole point is for your body to take on this strategy to protect your head from shaking, because this is why we don't shake babies, because it does damage to the brains, right? So
absolutely, yeah.
And we're no different, but we had this accelerometer to measure the vibrations on the head, and the way it fit is everyone had to use the same helmet, and it was like this old helmet that we used a Dremel tool to be able to fit the accelerometer on this sweaty, disgusting thing that fits on your forehead, and the helmet just didn't fit right on anyone because it was just the same helmet that we had to remove the internals. I don't know who thought that was a good idea, but
yeah, don't tell ethics about that one.
No, we did.
Helmet was on, but
the helmet.
The thing that blew my mind was not crashing with a shitty helmet, but how much, like, the vibrations of my arms and legs, how much dampening I was doing, and then my head was like, still, essentially.
Yeah, that's
going
where
down
the energy
these
goes.
Yeah, I mean, when you see the data and like Matt explains it to me, shows me, it's like, well, that makes sense. Otherwise, I'd be like, we know, the brain sits within the skull, and the skull can't like move or flex or anything, and so you can't just jiggle what is it? It's like having an egg in a glass of water. Is that what Blake said? And so, or like a jar. That's right. So if you jiggle the egg, and if you just kind of wobble it, it's fine. There's a bit of water there to dampen the but then if you shake it, the egg breaks.
Unfortunately, I've shaken my jar too much. I've had night concussions.
You don't want to drop it.
Show too much, but yeah, the jar's nearly smashed. Yeah, but so that's of interest as well. I guess you can see it if you watch clips of people riding and stuff. Once you see the head go, usually there's a crash coming, or it happens kind of at the same time, because that's where all your systems for figuring out where you are, what you're going to do, where the track is. And if your head starts dipping and you do a big donkey nod, then it's usually good night Vienna, and you're down with the ship. So
that's actually a really good point, because by the time you get to the point of your head kind of shaking, you've done something a little fishy to reduce your ability to control the bike. So whether that's being tired or just making a massive mistake, maybe because you're tired. And then you get the head bounce. And obviously then you kind of lose the ability to focus or control for a split second, and then you just eat the dirt.
Yeah. You end up on Friday fails. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's exactly it. Just from your hands and your feet, once your handlebars are going like crazy and you have to hold on to them, and you need your eyes and your brain in terms of cognitive function to be working. Because otherwise, well, you're riding a bike. It's not that simple. So that's where the energy goes, is in those little muscular contractions to kind of hold it all together and dampen it correctly. And at the same time, you have to make inputs to steer the bike in the right way if you want to pump to generate speed, that kind of stuff. It's not just a passive motion. So at that time, we started collaborating with engineering, and we're trying to figure out a way, because there's a lot of different ways to measure it in mountain biking. It was a perfect storm, really. Engineering had Transport Research Institute, and one of the guys there, Dr. Mark Taylor, had built a data bike, and it was just a hybrid for riding around town, but it had 2 accelerometers embedded in the grips, an HD camera, a GPS unit on a pannier on the back. It was the real deal. And it was measuring, I think, at 5 kilohertz, which is way higher than what we were. And with that, he could do proper hand-arm vibration analysis to ISO standards. So it was comparable then to a day spent on a building site holding on a jackhammer, or any other industry where stuff starts vibrating. So it brought a little bit of, you could compare it across the board then. So it just brought it into us to a bit more context. And thankfully, again, it was a bit more of a perfect storm with one of our MSc students, found this company in Newcastle. I think they were to do with Newcastle University, and they were a spin-off called Activity, who were making these little accelerometers that we could 3D print mounts for to put on the handlebars. And so, like I was saying, the technology as it developed definitely came to the point that we figured, actually, we can do this on the handlebar in a race situation. So it's kind of useful, I don't know if you agree, to bookend with the elite performers, see what they're doing. So this is pretty much as fast as someone's going to go on a bike with the best equipment, and they should be the highest trained. And let's see what comes off them. Let's see what they're doing themselves.
Yeah. So you guys were looking at the city bike, and you're looking at the data, and this person on a city bike is basically holding a jackhammer.
So if you're in Edinburgh, we do have a lot of cobbled streets, and if you rode that bike across town the wrong way, so to speak, to and from work, you could get pretty close to exceeding your recommended dose for vibration in a day, from what I understand from the research they did.
So why is there a recommended dose of vibration? Is that similar to what we talked about in terms of impact on the brain?
I think there are impacts on the brain, so there are neurological conditions associated, which I don't know that much about. But there's a lot of stuff going for the hand and arm system itself, so musculoskeletal.
Right. So a arthritic
finger
risk.
Yeah, there's a fairly big link between osteoarthritis and vibration exposure, self-reported in the workplace. And there's a lot of lumberjacks and stuff like that where that research is coming from. So yeah, it's pretty horrible stuff you don't really want to have. To the extent that when the data needs a lot of analysis to spit the numbers out. And when I sent the files, I had done an enduro race on a hardtail, with a fork that was kind of blown, and I sent him the files. I was like, all right, these are from 5 race stages. What do you think? And he phoned me, and he was like, what on earth have you been doing with this accelerometer? Have you changed this to, done the wrong multiple of 9.81 to get the right unit? And I was like, no, this is straight out of it. And he's like, okay, well, if you continue like this, you're not going to be able to wipe your arse when you're 40. I was like, okay. So, with a pinch of salt, because, yeah, I don't know if it's trainable and all that, but yeah, that's the kind of thing we were coming at. So
that's a huge issue, isn't it? So,
yeah,
we obviously don't want to be doing brain damage when we're mountain biking, but obviously the data says that it's risky, right?
Yeah. So these exposure limits, so the exposure activation value is 2.5 meters per second across a day, averaged 8-hour working day. And the exposure limit value, which is if you're in a working environment, you'd be sent home. Foreman would come over and say, early bath, away you go, come back tomorrow. That's 5 meters per second. And the highest we saw was 6.61 and the lowest was 5.47. So whatever way you skin the cat over those 2 races for those 2 elite riders, it wasn't going to be a particularly good outcome if you use those numbers. So alarm bells do start ringing because that's just one example of a race. That's not considering places like, if you got Whistler, you can fill your boots, you can ride until you literally cannot feel your hands, you can't pull the brakes and you crash into the lift line. So I'm not for a second saying that mountain biking isn't good for you, but it might not be as good as we thought, or that you shouldn't go mountain biking. So
yeah, like obviously we don't want anyone to stop mountain biking, but there are some things that we need to overcome, obviously, to keep everyone safe and at least to educate people on the potential risks. Because if we're going to get sent home from the work site by exceeding these limits, and then we exceed them in a race, I don't know what the answer is. Well, is there anything that we can do to reduce these vibrations? Have you guys looked at that?
Yeah, because I'm thinking of the mountain biking lumberjack. Like he gets knocked off early and he's like, I'm going to go ride some trails.
Right. Think about this guy. Like, how does he sleep at night?
He gets ripped for wearing a flannel shirt when he goes mountain biking. Like actually a lumberjack. Well, yeah, exactly. There you go. There's what does that guy do?
I hope he's listening.
He's like contemplating his decisions. Yeah. Has anyone ever looked at vibrations in running, Will? Have you ever heard of anything like this?
No, not at all. Like, right at the top of the show, you're sort of talking about innovation and kind of the innovator's dilemma, where you're like, hey, look, I've got this thing that can totally change our industry. Everyone's like, yeah, no, we're all good, thanks. Everyone's making money here. We'll you go and do that. And once you've got a fully formed prototype that works and you've displayed it on professional riders and everything, then we'll knock on your door. But running is so old school. A lot of the research being done now. We're getting the innovation. Like when you said, Lewis, you'd listen to that with Kim. She did the research on the shoes. We're getting that, but a lot of it's around form, running form, economy. Not so much the like vibrations or some of the stuff, Matt, you talked about in terms of energy return and of like what's happening, what's the ground giving back to your bones.
Every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction.
That's right.
The shoes are returning energy to us to make us more economical.
But yeah, I'm thinking about like in trail running, we can run downhill for an hour. And that is
that sounds horrible.
Yeah, well, it's the same kind of thing where if you could, in an ultra, you've been running for 6 hours and you start running downhill and you're jiggling your head and everything. Yeah, you'll eat some dirt pretty hard as well. And
do you guys get braking bumps?
Yeah, so that would be interesting actually to get some accelerometers, go for a run.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's the kind of thing. There's one of the guys in the PhD office was looking at accelerations in, I'm going to get all the wrong words now. It was army stuff, and he was looking at foot drill in recruits and how hard they stamp, basically when they come to attention, kind of thing. The kind of military stuff. And he now has a job with the MOD, looking at how potentially harmful that is. So similar thing, really. Applied some. Yeah,
there's been a lot of research on the transient impact, like especially, so there was a lot of the research that was cited when everyone wanted to run in bare feet, where if you land on the heel and then you transition onto the forefoot, there's this, depending on what shoes you have and how economical you are at your run form, your foot essentially hits the heel and then slaps the forefoot. And that transient impact, or the initial impact of the heel on the ground and then onto the forefoot. There's been stuff around that, but that's all like force plates or like force sensors in the shoe. But,
there were some insoles that came along. I don't know if it was to do with it was Dr. Alex Rockliffe. I don't know if it was to do with his research, but the military had been using those to look at the reduction in impact. But I don't know exactly what they did there. But that would be interesting. I've got them in my trail shoes just now for running. the downside to them is they reduce the feel a wee bit. So when you are running on some even surface, it's a bit clumpy. They're a bit thicker. So
Yeah.
don't know, but yeah, very interesting.
That's cool. Will, you should do your 24-hour track run with those.
Okay, cool. I'll slip them in for tomorrow.
Yeah.
Is that tomorrow?
Yeah.
Oh, nice. 24 hours.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, we'll have to do a whole episode on that one. That'll be the next episode, is follow on, and hopefully Will's still alive. You know, it's because talking about vibrations, and we're talking about like the guy with the jackhammer. I'm sitting here touching my thumbs, which I still can't feel from when I did the 24-hour mountain bike worlds in 2006. So I did, permanent nerve damage.
Yeah, I can't straighten my pinkies. That's as good as they get.
Right. So is that from mountain biking?
No, doctors have never seen it, so I think it's just from getting stoked and scared holding the handlebars. But
yeah,
I don't know.
Too many jackhammer followed by a ride kind of setup.
Yeah,
right?
That's my third job, building sites.
Yeah, so these vibrations obviously really bad, and we're experiencing super high level of what do we say, bad vibrations. Yeah. But what can we do? You know, like how can I get rid of or like stop someone else from getting this nerve damage in their thumbs? Yeah,
sorry. So I went on a tangent there, or we ended up on one. Anyway, there will be products out there which will reduce the vibration exposure that you get, or the handlebar vibration exposure, we'll call it that. And
is that the most important part to look at? Is the handlebars?
It's the one we've looked at so far. I'm going to do a similar Dremel experiment, I think, or possibly pedal modification experiment to see what comes through your feet. The hands are the ones that most people have trouble with, and probably the most important in terms of if you lose the sensation in your feet, it's not going to be ideal. But if you can't write, that's also possibly more challenging. Anyway, it's on the list. So at the moment thinking handlebars, but yeah, pedals, insoles. The real reason we were looking at those insoles from running was that we thought they might have an application in mountain biking. And if you see the sort of a lot of the feedback in reviews is how stiff or not is a shoe. And you can imagine that is going to have some impact on what comes through the soles of your feet. So this is all stuff we don't know. This is all on the list of things we want to do. I do think it probably depends on the rider, the mass of the system, if you're on an e-bike, that kind of thing, because force is mass times acceleration, and accelerations are ultimately what give you vibration as the oscillatory motion. So,
and that's related to speed. So the faster you ride,
yes,
obviously your vibration exposure increases.
Faster you ride and the heavier you are. So thankfully I'm just heavy. I'm not very fast, so I should be okay. But, so suspension setup, like there's a big trend fairly recently, especially when Gwyn was winning. Memorable ones is Val de Soleil run when he rode down on what looked like a rigid Fox 40. And I think there was a trend for a while of running your fork real hard so that it didn't dive ever, but also probably destroyed your hands. And that's the kind of thing. Was it faster? Don't know. Did it give you more vibration? For some, maybe not. Maybe it worked better, that kind of thing. So I guess what I'm getting at is it's an individual setup. And unfortunately can't talk about the ins and outs of the commercial work we've done to date. But yes, some products will reduce the vibration exposure at the handlebars. And the Holy Grail, which we've seen, is one that reduces the vibration exposure at the bars and you go faster, which, given what we just talked about, that's why it's a Holy Grail, because you have more control and you're going faster and you get less through your hands, like enough that it would make a difference over a day, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So it could be like a cause effect kind of thing, like, well, we're reducing these vibrations at your hands, therefore you go faster.
Yeah. It wouldn't surprise me if we end up finding out that it's the rate limiting factor to performance. So you can go as fast as you can hold on to, if that makes sense.
Is that due to like the energetic, metabolic, muscular, skeletal muscle demands of dampening those vibrations? Do you think? Like if you can reduce that, is that then going to allow you to concentrate more or conserve energy for later in the race? What do you...
It could be both, really, because I think with the more vibration exposure you get, the more negative effect that has on your cognitive ability to kind of focus on the track. So if you're thinking about where you're going to brake, rather than getting shaken to bits, that's going to be beneficial. But also in terms of, there was a paper by Ronestad et al. Where they added vibration to sprint intervals on a bike, and adding the vibration increased the time above 90% of VO2 max, but it didn't change time for heart rate. So it maybe changes the sort of metabolic pathways that are at use, again, if that's the right terminology, for as you're going through a race. So if you're increasing vibration, it's maybe going to increase your oxygen consumption. That's when we get back to the kind of economy idea. So if you can reduce the vibration and you bring oxygen consumption down a bit, then theoretically, to me, that's going to be a good thing. So we ultimately don't know. That's my opinion at the moment. So.
That kind of goes alongside what we were doing with and this is what led to the braking research, is we had different pacing strategies down a hill. So you could race down a hill and you didn't pedal that much, and your oxygen uptake went way up and your heart rate was way up. But then if you coasted down the hill, your oxygen uptake was lower. Your vibration exposure was actually the same, but we went the same speed. So by changing the way the energy was used or demanded by what we were doing, we were able to focus better. And we thought, well, it's probably because we're braking more efficiently by pacing better. So it's kind of like this system where everything works together. Like, okay, we can reduce vibrations, we'll go faster. We can reduce our energy, the energy that we use, we can go faster.
Yeah.
So it's all like this perfect storm where everything works together and we can optimize everything.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I don't imagine that braking and vibration are going to be too far away from each other, because I would be willing to bet that when you're hard on the brakes, you're going to be changing that system again in terms of how the bike acts, both under braking with the suspension and because you're gripping so much tighter.
Yeah, how you absorb it, like with two active fingers, essentially, like you're removing.
Yeah.
So we've been looking at this actually a little bit. This is just like our for fun thing. But since we're, as you do, like, brake it, so what else can I do today? But I'm really interested in it because with our data logger, we can measure the accelerations at one place on the bike. So if we put that in the center of the bike, we can kind of assume that that's a whole system vibration in a way. So if we mount it on the down tube or something like that. So then if we would change the suspension setup, we would expect to see a difference in vibrations, if there is an effect of the suspension. But what we can also see is we can also see the vibrations just during braking. So we can say, okay, you're braking, this is the vibrations now, and then this is your vibrations when you're not braking. So if we're looking at like a turn with braking bumps, for example, and we're trying to optimize the way that we use our energy, maybe what we want to do to go faster overall is to brake before these braking bumps and slow down a lot and then coast through them, because we don't want to increase the vibrations just by braking in the braking bumps, which will slow us down later. So we've been looking at that a little bit.
This reeks of potential collaboration.
Yeah, we should talk offline.
I think this is a can of worms we've just opened.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. That's basically what it all comes back to. And then you've got to throw in, like, it's like a Rubik's Cube covered in Vaseline and a jet wash that you're trying to solve, because there's so many different parts of the puzzle, because you've got line choice, like you say. Do you go around the braking bumps, or do you brake before them and let off through them? And all that kind of stuff, and that's where track to track things can change. So some tracks will have more chatter and almost no sort of single high impacts, and then other tracks will be very smooth and have some huge hits where it's big drops to flat or whatever. So that's the other aspect in terms of if we're talking about vibration in general and also how to reduce it. It could be line choice, it could be riding style, it could be your approach, because like you say, if you set me up at the top of a track and say, right, go as fast as you can, I will, the red mist descend and it's a mess. Whereas if you start thinking about how do you ride, and you can feel it yourself when you start riding smoother, but also faster. So that's another thing to add into the mix in terms of.
So if we before you said Aaron Gwynn is like 5-time world champ. He ran his fork.
He's never won a world championships, actually. He's
okay.
won
overall World Cup.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And world's best.
Yeah, he's good. I just figured we're gonna have a lot of mountain bikers listening to this, so we might as well just he's a runner. We'll just give him a pass here.
Yeah, come on. He ran his fork a certain way, right? And then you get all this hearsay. It was, pretty much locked out, blah, blah. There's a certain, system they changed it. And even with just over the last weekend, I think, or last World Cups, you saw Luke Bruni like switching something in his settings for the fast part. Anyway, you've got that, and then you got people like chattering, hearsay. Now you're saying like you guys are talking about, do you brake before the braking bumps, after, in the corner, whatever, and some tracks are going to have more, less, faster, and so you got separate tracks. Now we're at the World Cup, right? And these riders' job, like one job is to go as fast as possible. How much of this data drives the riders' decision making, or on the day, like how much of this are they getting? Like, is it just hearsay? Like, oh, you need to run 13 psi, because that's what everyone's definitely doing. Or is it, I measured this. This is your suspension settings. This is your power outputs. You're definitely not going to pedal for the first quarter of the race because it's gonna. Or is it still a point where you're collecting the data, but it's not yet filtering out into the wider community?
You do make sense, Will.
Yeah,
I think what you're asking is like at the races, is anyone doing this, or are people just like doing what they always do?
So, from personal experience, I'd love to say that we have telemetry on the bikes all the time or data acquisition, and that I know the guys' power outputs off by heart and all this kind of stuff. But the reality is, that last year there was a bit of a debacle over should we run 35 mil bars or 31.8 mil bars, and at this point I wasn't employed by the university and I didn't have any equipment to hand, so we did the natural best next fit thing, which was put a set of bars in a direct mount stem that would sort of hold itself up on a flat surface, and we blindfolded the riders, closed the doors in the van, and asked them to do press ups in the back, and they were allowed to run the bar that they thought was flexiest or would be most compliant.
So the feelings
not a word of a lie. But the long-term aim, which I'm trying to figure out now, again, this is the kind of thing that COVID didn't do us any favor with, would be to sync our data with a video, and then you could actually put data on. It's not very intrusive, and it would be relatively easy to do in terms of time, and we have enough analysis and stuff that we could probably make it work at a race. But we just haven't got that far yet. Just with things with being the way they are this year, it's not really happened. But it's definitely going that way. And sometimes it's a flex, like at Snowshoe last year, with the whole overall battle between Omri and Loic, and it was final run before finals, so last practice run, and Loic had been riding round the other side of the pits all weekend, or all week rather, after practice, and we were next to the Commensal tent, and the last run before his finals run, he rode past us on his data acquisition bike, having just done a run, and he just looked into Omri and said, hello, and cycled past. And I don't know if that is a flex, if it's just he didn't want to go down the other side, or if it's, yeah, I'm making changes, I'm going to beat you. And, you know what I mean? They've got a lot of data to look at. And personally, between that time and finals run, I was busy making sure nothing was going to fall off the bike. But if they made changes and it paid off, then fair enough. But
well, that's kind of what I'm thinking. Like, how much time is there? Like, I look at what happens at a race, and then, like, you have your set schedule, you have some downtime, but the whole point is for the athlete to go as fast as possible, and the rest of the staff to make sure everything's ready. And so your job is mechanic. You're not there as like a data dude.
No.
Right? You wouldn't have time to do that, right?
Absolutely, yeah. I'm not, this isn't a cry for sympathy at all, but like last year, I was looking after two riders, a junior and an elite. So Elliot Jameson and Henry Fitzgerald. And I was up at Worlds. I was up at 5:30 in the morning and wouldn't get to bed until sort of 11 p.m. And that was just fixing bikes all day. Because realistically, you know, you could work on those bikes all day long and still not be done, because there's always something you could try and get a little bit better. And I think that's why the good guys at the moment, I'm not sure even about Minar, actually. I know he's got some data acquisition, but a lot of the top guys have a suspension guy that they will bring to the races, Norco included, and they do testing pre-season. So ultimately, this would all be done before the season, and you would decide what bars you're going to run. For example, what grips, all that kind of stuff. If you really wanted to dive into it, it wouldn't be at a race, unless you had a specific problem. You know, if your arms were blowing up and we needed to figure out what was going on. But that's the most obvious application I can think of. So, for example, this year we had a dry setup for the bikes, like a dry race setup and a wet setup, that I was emailed day one when we arrived in Europe. And that's the settings that we used, and that's the settings they raced on. So it was all decided before we got there, because we were, once you get into that zone, it's fixing bikes or it's sleeping, really. So occasional beer, but mostly work.
Yeah. So just way too full on to be able to like do a proper
Well,
experiment.
with the personnel that they have, right?
Yeah.
With what Norco has available, and even then, like say, it can be quite difficult. I think even if I was a standalone, it wouldn't be easy. It would be a full-time job in itself to do that. So, and of those guys, I don't know how many of them use data and how much of them use sort of subjective feedback from the riders.
So at the moment, there appears like, you know, you do some testing pre-season to get that data acquisition, figure it all out, and then from there, there's not a lot of room to fit all of this in with the current standings.
Yeah, I think if you're really good and you'd done that testing with the same kit that you then took to the races, you could probably take inferences from that data. But you know, if it was a standalone like I am, I go to the race at the moment where I go to the races, and that's it. You know, if I was presented with a Standex system, say, I wouldn't know how to read that data. I'd have to learn that, and by the time I'd done that, I'd be on the flight home if I was lucky. So
right, so no different than like as a coach, you learn an athlete's data. You know, you learn all of the what they're doing, and then they'll come to the first race of the season, and you take away a lot from that. Like, oh yeah, well, you know, pacing, where you expended energy, how you tape it in, blah blah blah. So that I see. So the scope would be huge so far if you had that dedicated data person that you just took along and then can infer what could be significant changes based off of data because of the history. But at the moment, yes, data acquisition's occurring, but it's occurring so infrequently that it's hard to like get that consistency in making those fine tweaks. Yeah,
basically. And it can be not necessarily frustrating, but it's just there's a lot still to be done. And I would quite like to develop that ultimately, because I think it could be very useful for a lot of people. You know, you still hear of a lot of chat around the pits of people having trouble holding on, like hand, forearms, that kind of thing. So I do still think we have a long way to go. And sometimes that can be because it's almost come at the expense of going fast. So Gwyn probably could ride that setup because he could hold on to it, if that makes sense. Maybe
for him.
Threshold for... Yeah, exactly. So yeah, that's where the hearsay, like you were talking about, kind of can be problematic. Because if you look at Loic's bike, it's not set up particularly firm. If you see the video of him landing off the big step down at Val di Sole or whatever, they're running 28 spoke wheels rather than 32. And I'm pretty sure they're not tensioned up mad tight because they flex like anything when he lands off anything. You know what I mean? So
I don't, but yeah.
So, if you watch him ride, you know, it's still different ways to skin the cat.
It's amazing. Like I'm not even like looking at anything like that when I'm watching.
You're just still looking at their kits.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, man, that kit's cool.
94% shoes on. Yeah.
Like mountain bike shoes. Oh, weird.
Yeah. The other thing I think this could be really useful for is, it was kind of touched a bit about the recovery and the vibration being a better indicator from what we've seen than training impulse. would be to integrate this into a sort of wider training program setup, because I don't have any coaching experience personally, but from speaking to some of my supervisor coaches, some fairly high level enduro athletes, and I think it would be fair to say he finds it difficult sometimes to judge recovery and or the training load from those athletes without knowing a bit more about the sort of abuse they've taken off the bike. And by abuse, I mean vibration. So you can ride 3 hours and it's all on fairly easy OZ blue trails, or you could ride 3 hours and it be, through the ringer, the roughest terrain you've ever hit, that kind of thing, and you can't feel your hands at the end. And it seems like that may have a bigger impact on recovery. So.
Yeah, because these last few weeks, was it the last month, they must have had 2 back-to-back weekends, was it, in a row, or at least over a fortnight. So then you're thinking 2 race runs, which are just super intense, and the lead up to the race run, I don't know how many practice, walking the track, like the demand on that month. Obviously it's COVID, that doesn't normally happen, but if you're just measuring heart rate, you're getting a delayed response because of, they're sitting in the start heart and then of the slow component of heart rate, and a lot of them don't run power meters, so you're not even getting some force outputs or power outputs. And
does anyone run a power meter at the World Cup in downhill?
Not that I've seen.
No.
But it doesn't mean that no one does. I'm also pretty sure my heart rate is higher than the rider's heart rate when they're in the start gate.
So you're like totally warmed up, ready to go.
Yeah.
They should just send you down.
Yes. So this is where, I mean, there must be huge potential for vibrations to help inform coaches, support staff, riders about what's going on during.
You've nailed it.
Yeah.
And there were some findings that I'd really like to sort of go back and explore a bit more with grip strength. And I think once your grip strength starts to fade away, which must be related to vibration exposure, then that's when, you hit a big compression, your hand comes off the handlebar, and whatever way you look at it, that's not going to end well. And that's like, how many crashes have we seen? That's 2/3 of Commensal 100%, broken wrist. And then I'm just thinking, I can't think off the top of my head now. There's been so many injuries. Vero Woodman crashed out at Worlds, that kind of thing, over this short period of time. And yeah, it's a compressed race season, but I do wonder how much of that is to do with the fatigue that these riders have been, or the training load these guys have gone through over that month of racing. So more unknowns, I'm afraid.
Yeah, just leads to more questions, I guess. But the fact that no one's really doing anything, not really doing it, like properly doing anything about it at the races, we just need to change that. Like, how can we change that? What can we do as scientists to kind of...
Well, one thing you said, Matt, like, just in us talking, was like, everyone's trying to make the bike go faster. Right? Like a lot of the starter acquisitions, like, well, how can we make a stiffer frame, more flex, more rigidity through the back end? Like, how can we make these hubs lighter? Not like, how can we make this rider hold on a bit longer?
Yeah. And that's where it becomes interesting in terms of how do you make sure you do that without damaging the rider in a negative way? And I mean that as in, like, the typical training model is that you damage things to a certain extent, controlled fashion, and then they heal stronger. So you don't want to absolutely rinse anyone. But yeah, you're absolutely right. And that comes, it was Rory Cunningham years ago when he rode for Rocky Mountain, and he had a knee reconstruction after, I think he had kicked himself in the hip the wrong way, if that makes sense. And he had a reconstruction, spent all winter in the gym, was like form of his life, jumped on his downhill bike and just couldn't hold on, couldn't do it, because he didn't have that specificity in terms of grip and the dynamic movement. That's not just vibration. There's obviously other stuff at play there, but yeah, it's all quite interesting in that regard. And he'd been lifting a lot of weight. Then you get into all sorts of other stuff because his forearms were so muscular, or this isn't just Rory, this is many a rider. Forearms have become so muscular that when they hold on, they can't get any blood in. And there's no
yeah.
Then you end up in a even worse spot. So you can bench press 100 kg. But
yeah, that's why for some of the enduro guys that I work with, we would have them go on the elliptical machine.
Right.
You know, like the one where you move your arms and you see the old people at the gym doing it. Just because, you get some aerobic development in your upper body. And, if we're talking about arm pump, like if we can increase the ability to utilize oxygen or even store oxygen in those muscles, could potentially be a benefit. But that's I guess, a whole other thing.
In my head, I'm like, keep thinking about, have you seen the South Park where they have shaker weight? The shaker.
No, tell us.
I'll need to watch it.
Yeah, no, anyone listening will be like, oh, it's shaker weight.
Is it not safe for podcast?
Nah.
Yeah. It's while we're talking about this though, it's interesting because before we came on, I was thinking, I was delving into a wee bit just to refresh my memory on some of the neurological stuff. I was like, because it's been one of those topics that's just escaped me. You know how it is. You keep meaning to go and look, and I had a quick Google, as you do, and ended up on PubMed, and it's a lot about how good certain doses of vibration are for you in terms of...
Oh, that's right. There's a guy in our department that was doing that. Do you remember, Matt?
The vibration plates. Is that what you mean, Lewis?
That's what he did. And he said that, well, that was vibration plates aided recovery in team sports players.
All right, yeah, I've not seen that one.
But so that was just because it was like small muscular contractions that improved like metabolic activation and blood flow without really needing to do anything. It was like 10 minutes of a low frequency vibration. That was able to engage like muscular contractions and aid with the recovery, as opposed to doing whatever, like a swim or something like that.
Yeah, you just get to stand still and
it
happens. But there's other stuff. It's really bad because I just looked, but it was kind of stuff like neurological, like pathological conditions that people were trying to reverse symptoms of using whole body vibration and this kind of thing. So it's not all bad. It's quite interesting anyway, but it's probably worth mentioning.
Yeah, so like maybe
magnitude and frequency.
Sick people should ride mountain bikes more, and mountain bikers should ride road bikes more.
Yeah. But then road bikes, road bikes can be even worse. Sebastian Duke probably pronounced that horrendously. His group in France, and they did a Paris-Roubaix study. They had an accelerometer on the handlebar and I think the seat post of a bike, and they went through the same limits I was talking about in something like 62 seconds or something, which is a lot quicker than you hit on a mountain bike. 100 psi, 23 mil tires, ragging it along some cobbles. So yeah, beware. Stick to the smooth tarmac if you're a road bike.
Oh yeah, I did this one race up north of Australia, and it was like renowned. And I was like, I'm from New Zealand, like we have pretty rough roads.
Rough roads.
This road had been neglected for years, and yeah, I was running carbon like tubulars at like 130 psi, and I had this rear-mounted bottle cage, classic triathlete. Jiggled the nuts straight out, like just it fell off my bike, and like people, because I like make sure you tighten all your bottle cages, I'm like, whatever, and literally there's bottles all over the like it was just if it can jiggle a bottle cage off of your bike, what's it doing to your brain?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so that's my question. I think as we start to kind of wrap up this vibration thing, I see like this is something that's really bothered me, and I kind of wanted to ask you. So we see like these things with the kids, they sit on your top tube, super close to the handlebars. We know the vibrations at the handlebars are really high. So the ones the kids sit there, you mount the thing directly on your top tube, kids hold on to your handlebars. So they're sitting on your top tube, right? What's happening? What are the potential issues here? Or do you see anything potentially going wrong? We don't shake babies for a very good reason, but now we have a baby sitting on our top tube going mountain biking with us. Yeah, they love it, but is that safe?
Well, I should say as a disclaimer, the following is my opinion. I'm not qualified. I don't have data to say otherwise, but personally, I do not think it's going to be a good idea for the reasons you've just mentioned. Certainly until proven otherwise. Very happy to be proven wrong on this one. But from what I understand, babies are not just small adults. Certainly when it comes to vibration, and I would imagine in terms of development of the brain, I don't know, but I'd suspect the egg in the jar looks a bit different and possibly more fragile for the child. They are completely out of control in terms of, or they're reliant on you for the control. They don't have the movement of their legs to, as far as I'm aware, again, it maybe depends on the model, to absorb the impacts from their feet. They are, like you say, they're forced to sit down all the time, and they're holding on to the handlebars right at the stem. And from the ones I've seen, they don't always have grips either. So they're holding on to carbon or alloy. And the rider would also be getting, as well as grips, that handlebar will move and flex at the far end compared to right next to the stem, which is where the whole thing with the 31.8 versus 35mm bars on the team came from, and why some handlebars are unrideable, because they don't dissipate anything. So to answer your question,
if you just sit down and go ride, like don't dampen anything with your legs, you're just sitting down. Even if you just ride off a curb.
Yeah, we did a study on that. We
feel
did
that in your neck.
Where we sat going down steps.
Yeah.
And we measured all the vibrations. It was actually really hard to stay seated because it was just so bumpy, obviously. That's why we don't do it. But yeah, and I was thinking after that, like, because the vibrations were higher also at the handlebars by staying seated, because it's a whole system.
Yeah.
And I'm just thinking then, about these, if there was a kid on there and, on the, okay, I'll stick with the easy trails because I don't want to crash when I have my kid on the top tube of my bike. Well, the easy trails are faster. When we're at higher speeds, we actually increase the vibrations.
When was the last time you chose to have a crash? I guess is my question. Like I did this. I had something like 40 odd stitches in my elbow after I exposed the bone on what I would consider to be the easiest track in my area. I was sitting down at the time, actually, and I was shouting at one of my friends, making a silly noise. And my front wheel went off the track, and I ate shit. And yeah, I could, like, I don't want kids, but if I had kids, I could easily have had my kid on there at that time, if that makes sense. And that's the kind of level I was riding at. And that's what scares me. I mean, I don't want to tell people what to do, but I wouldn't be doing that. And I worry that the outcome could be serious in terms of development for kids, or also that eventually, like I was riding at the weekend, I'm actually going to move there in the end, Innerleithen. It's had the EWS events there, that kind of thing. And we were riding up the fire road. And normally you only ever see people riding up the fire road. And there was someone coming the other way. And like, this is a fairly steep fire road. You can get some pace up down that. And I saw this woman coming down. I was like, wow, she's hauling. And we were lucky we moved out of her way in time, kind of thing. She smiled and said hi. And then she had a kid on one of these seats. And like, I didn't know what to say. And my supervisor seen her before I did. And I thought he was maybe, when he said he thought she was on a motorbike when she was coming towards him. And I was like, I don't know if you could go that fast down there, but she was hauling. And I was thinking, that's a fire road. I've had tires blow out, all that kind of thing. I don't want to be a negative Nancy, but that scared me. Like, that really scared me. So, there you go. In my end, yes, they might enjoy it, but
yeah, I think as non-parents, like parents can be. We don't want to kind of make it anyone. We don't want to make it seem like we're saying people are bad parents because of this. These are just our thoughts. But
oh no, absolutely, and I'm not a parent, so
yeah, neither.
My brain's
So
not wired that way, and obviously,
Will's here.
Your children is up to you, but
yeah, I'm looking at Will's face. Will's like,
these bloody guys. You don't even know. Your kid's crying. They want to get on the bike. You're going to get on the bike and you're going to go 80 k's down a fire road. It's just what you're going to do as a parent.
James loves
shut them up. Yeah, they won't argue back then.
No, it's it was something Matt made me think about right away. Like even when we've got the Thule Trundler, and I was like making sure it has like a leaf spring suspension. And I was like watching James in the back, even running with him in the running pram, and kind of keeping an eye on how how those vibrations are, because their neck is not well developed. Well, their whole body isn't. They're a baby. So that they can't even stand. So how are they going to dampen anything? So it is concerning. But you say, like, I'll just make this kind of comment around, the egg in the jar. The development of their skull is not fully formed. So I don't know if that does actually provide, because they do fall over a lot, and they must be designed to like handle that. And they also,
it's like an egg in a bag, maybe.
And this is just the three guys talking about something they have no idea about, but also, so it would be really interesting research, because I'm sure those seats have been around for a couple decades, and so have those trundlers and running prams, and I mean everyone's had a piggyback when they're young and gone for a run. So who knows? I
think it's kind of like the mountain biking stuff that we're talking about for this, more aimed at ourselves, in that if what we're hoping to do is make sure it's safe. And
like you need to identify that, like it's clearly there's a potential for harm, and that's
if it's not, then we can hopefully make it better. That's
exactly right.
Rather than no, don't do it, you can't have any fun ever.
So where's from here, like where are you leading? Like what's your trajectory, assuming the world is open?
Well, hopefully going to sign again for Norco next year, to do more mechanics. Really enjoy fixing bikes, and then a bit open-ended at the moment. Hopefully find out today or tomorrow about contract with Napier, and ideally I would really like to continue the work that we've done and work with some more companies and kind of develop our repertoire of the services we can offer. So I'd like to think that if a company comes to us with a problem we don't yet have a solution for, that we can engineer a solution, if that makes sense. And in the big picture for that, there's some Borderlands funding coming up soon, for which my boss is through the final stages for. My boss and team, so Developing Mountain Biking in Scotland and Mountain Bike Centre of Scotland, together for £19 million to develop an innovation centre and a bike park, which will be our trail lab. So
wow,
ultimately that is the dream, because to be able to do that, and even things like, okay, what track are we going to use to test this product, will no longer be a dilemma. It'll be, well, we've got the indoor one, we've got the outdoor 1, 2, 3, whatever. So, and a maker lab, and you know what I mean. So that's
sounds
the
like the
ultimate
dream.
long term. Yeah. So, and that'll be in Innerleithen. Just one more signature to go, I believe. Again, that'll be this month. So, long term, that's ideally where I want to be, but we'll see how it all works out. Maybe the academic glandular fever will get me, and I'll end up doing something else. But
there you go. You just got to stay on it, hey?
Yeah. And if I don't do that, then I'd be interested in approaching Norco to see if we could work on some of the testing, like it's spoken about, sort of pre-season stuff, and then as time goes on. But we'll see.
Cool.
So, and I'll keep riding my bike in a very average fashion.
Awesome. Well, that's probably a good way to wrap it up.
Yeah, that's been super interesting. Really enjoyed having you on. Thanks heaps for staying up.
Staying up till 26 minutes past 7. Yeah. Party night.
Crazy.
So thank you very much for having me. It's been really enjoyable, and you've given me a lot to think about. And thanks very much.
So where are you most present on your social media?
Instagram is probably the place to find me. Lewis_Kirkwood. That's my go-to at the moment. So
sweet. I'll put a link to that in the description. All right, mate. We'll let you get on with your evening.
Cool. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Lewis.